Imagine surviving a devastating tornado only to discover that something much more terrifying is lurking in the shadows. This is the story of The Darkness After the Tornado, where the survivors of a devastated town must face dark forces that emerge after the storm. Press play and join us on this scary journey. It was an ordinary summer afternoon in the small town of Ravenwood. The residents were used to occasional storms, but nothing could prepare them for what was coming. The sky darkened quickly, and within minutes, a colossal tornado appeared on the horizon. In a matter of moments, the town was overtaken by chaos and destruction. Emergency sirens echoed as the residents ran for shelter. Jessica, a young teacher, grabbed her children and rushed to the basement of their house. The fury of the tornado lasted only a few minutes, but left a trail of destruction that transformed Ravenwood into an apocalyptic scene. When the tornado finally passed, Jessica emerged from the basement with her children, only to find a desolate scene. Houses were destroyed, trees uprooted, and debris scattered everywhere. The air was heavy with dust and the smell of burnt wood. The survivors began to emerge from their shelters, trying to process the magnitude of the destruction. As she walked through the devastated streets, Jessica found some neighbors and friends, all in a state of shock. They quickly realized that communication was down and that they would need to band together to face the challenges ahead. They set up a small camp in the center of town, where they could take care of each other and plan their next steps. As night fell, the feeling of discomfort grew. It wasn't just the fear of the tornado, but something deeper and more primal. The town was enveloped in an oppressive silence, as if the very air was charged with tension. The survivors gathered around makeshift fires, sharing stories and trying to keep their spirits up, but it was impossible to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. Jessica noticed that the wind, which had previously carried distant sounds of animals and insects, was now deadly silent. The shadows seemed to move strangely, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That's when she started hearing whispers, low and indistinguishable, but clearly present. The first night after the tornado was a true nightmare. As darkness fell over Ravenwood, the whispers intensified, and dark figures began to move in the shadows. One of the survivors, a man named Tom, went out to gather supplies and never returned. His body was found the next morning, horribly mutilated, with a look of pure terror on his face. Panic took hold of the group. They realized they were dealing with something beyond the physical, something supernatural that thrived on darkness and fear. Jessica tried to stay calm, but she knew they needed to find a way to protect themselves from the invisible threat. The survivors began taking desperate measures to protect themselves. They built barricades with debris, lit more fires, and took turns keeping watch. But the dark forces seemed to feed on fear, becoming bolder and more violent each night. Jessica and a small group of survivors decided to explore the town for answers. They came across an old diary in one of the destroyed houses, which spoke of an ancient curse that hung over Ravenwood. According to the diary, the tornado had awakened ancient and malevolent forces that now roamed the town in search of victims. Determined to end the terror, the group of survivors followed the diary's instructions and went to an old cemetery on the outskirts of town. There, they found an ancient altar covered with strange symbols. As they tried to decipher the symbols, the temperature dropped abruptly, and dark figures began to materialize around them. Jessica, her heart racing, began to recite the words found in the diary, hoping to seal the malevolent forces. The shadows attacked, and a desperate struggle ensued. Many in the group were captured and taken into the darkness, their screams of agony echoing in the night. With few survivors remaining, Jessica realized they would need to sacrifice something of value to seal the curse. Determined to protect her children and what was left of the town, she offered a family medallion she always carried with her. The shadows hesitated, and the darkness seemed to momentarily retreat. But the relief was short-lived. The dark forces were not satisfied with the sacrifice and returned with even more fury. Jessica, exhausted and hopeless, tried to protect her children, but she knew time was running out. The shadows advanced, and the last thing she saw was the pale and distorted face of an ancient, malevolent figure. The few remaining survivors took refuge in an abandoned church, hoping the sacred ground would protect them. They knew the fight was far from over, and that dark forces still roamed Ravenwood. The nights were filled with whispers and distant screams, constantly reminding them of the terror they had faced. Jessica was never seen again, but her story became a legend among the survivors. They spoke of her bravery and sacrifice, trying to make sense of the nightmare they had lived through. The town of Ravenwood was abandoned, and what remained of it stood as a grim warning to anyone who dared venture there. The story of the darkness after the tornado is a reminder that not all natural disasters are purely physical. Sometimes the true terror hides in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The survivors of Ravenwood will never forget the horrors they faced, and their lives were forever marked by fear and darkness. Want part 2 of this story? Leave it in the comments. If you have a horror story and want to see it published on our channel, send us your story.